So good morning. My name is Lawrence Spinetta. I'm a director at KPMG's infrastructure practice within its advisory services. I previously served as a F-15 fighter pilot in the Air Force before transitioning to drones. I ended my career commanding the Air Force's Global Hawk drone fleet, so 750 folks at 5 different locations worldwide. I also had the opportunity or the privilege of leading the Air Force's MQ-1 Predator Schoolhouse, so responsible for various curriculums to train airmen to fly, fix, and employ these drones. So perhaps I offer some real-world global experience operating drones, and along the way I picked up a thesis on, or PhD thesis, I should say, on when and why organizations adopt disruptive innovations. So first, I just want to thank Felipe Veron and Veron Vehicles for organizing Skyscraper. Again, it's been just a tremendous, impressive series of roundtables to discuss urban air mobility and drones in particular in Latin America. It's been pretty fantastic to exchange ideas about the future of urban air mobility with visionaries who really are out there today, formulating ideas, building products that will undoubtedly change the world. So what I thought I'd do today in my relatively short allotted time is just cover 10 different misconceptions or observations or predictions, many of which are contrary to the herd or to consensus thinking that we heard on these roundtables. That's why I think they're valuable. These are going to be fairly quick insights given the time constraints. So feel free, of course, to reach out if you want to talk in more detail, ask questions, or frankly, just tell me that I'm wrong. So here we go. So insight number one, large and costly vertiports are a complete waste of money. In fact, saddling this new disruptive technology with high infrastructure costs, I think is exactly the wrong approach. Indeed, successful drone startups will seek to minimize cost, remain nimble, and thus increasing the likelihood of getting to market. Moreover, vertiports tend to funnel traffic into bottlenecks, which prevents achieving high passenger volume and thus reaching the mass market. Besides, you all want to be in the disruptive technology business, not the real estate market. So the bottom line is that vertiports, at least I think, are going to be a cost center and not a profit center. Insight number two, commercial drones are going to travel a path of low-end disruption, not high-end disruption. And that's exactly the same adoption path that drones followed within the military, and it's exactly the same path that traditional aircraft also followed. Drones will succeed first by serving secondary or peripheral markets and then grow to threaten other core businesses. So in the military, this has meant gaining a foothold in missions that are inherently dull, dangerous, different, or just difficult to access, and then they progress to compete over more core complex missions. For example, going from surveillance to attack. Indeed, airplanes came about, the adoption path is exactly the same way. First, what happened is they were used for things like complementary uses, for artillery spotting over the horizon for battleships so they could know where their rounds were landing. And then as time and technology progressed, they competed with battleships, and of course the aircraft carrier displaced the battleship. So commercial applications are going to follow the same path. Urban air mobility, I think, is really the holy grail that will develop a little bit later on, but a more promising first adoption path is going to be ones that chart perhaps routes that are slightly outside of the city, maybe delivering cargo to the outskirts that get picked up by other forms of transportation that are a little less risky to people on the ground. Airspace regulators like the FAA and others are probably going to be more amenable to approving these routes than core urban air mobility operations, but of course that's coming in the future. I want to point everybody to a book or a series of books written by Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen. It starts with the innovator's dilemma. It outlines this path, again, low to high end disruption. I think it's fantastic, and it's going to predict what the future is going to happen for drones. Which brings me to points 3, 4, and 5, which based off of Christensen and others' frameworks, I think are extraordinarily terrible ideas for first use cases. And surprisingly, we talked about these use cases a bunch over the course of Skyscraper. So number 3, are replacing helicopters with drones for executive urban mobility. Uh, that's a high-end disruption. I don't think it's a promising business at all, and I don't think it's going to be an early use case. To start with, I think the market for that sort of use is very, very, very tiny. Drones may offer a price advantage, but business travelers are price insensitive. So you're competing over a factor that they care less about. They care more about factors such as safety. I chuck a little bit the other day because a colleague found a really neat 1950s New York Airways advertisement from a helicopter company that said it was going to replace black car service for executives competing on price. The bottom line, it's been 70 years and counting, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. So what that means when you look at prospective businesses and you look at various sort of studies that start with the premise that black car services will be one of the first early adoption cases, I think you can just stop reading that study and look elsewhere for more insightful studies. Same with number 4, emergency medical rescue. I don't think that's going to be it's going to be a non-starter, at least in the near future, doing life flights with patients between different hospitals. Why? Because it requires onboard trained medical personnel. I think maybe an early use case will be, of course, organs between hospitals, but not the high-end sort of disruption that involves complex patient care. Same goes for number 5 with airport shuttle service. I know it's, a lot of people like to think about this because it's connected towards other flying environments, but it really complicates airspace deconfliction. It's the exception rather than the rule for drones to operate near traditional aircraft. Moreover, people bring a ton of luggage to airports, and based off of the current technology for drones, it's not going to be able to have the lift capacity to do that. With all that said, I don't think that there are a ton of obstacles to adoption for drones. I don't think it's as difficult as people make it out to be. For number 6, we had some discussion over the course of Skyscraper about the last mile problem. I think that's all overblown. I don't think UAM businesses have to solve that last mile problem. If you build it, essentially they'll come. Take Uber drivers, for example. They're pretty savvy about making real-time adjustments to pickup locations to meet changing demands, and I just don't see that being an issue. Number 7, the same is true with traffic management problems. I think that's all overblown as well. I think airspace deconfliction can occur without a complex, expensive traffic management system that's relying on ADS-B or other emerging technologies. If you just look at traditional aircraft, for example, we flew around without air traffic control for 50 plus years, relying on procedures such as hemispheric altitude restrictions, airways, restricted airspace, etc. There are very few helicopters that fly over cities. In fact, there are no fixed-wing aircraft that fly over cities, at least not that on the altitudes that U.S. fly. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of commercial incentives, increasing political pressure on airspace regulators to segment, restrict, or fragment airspace, especially low-level routes between and over cities. And I actually think that's right? I mean, why do traditional aviation have the right to keep UAS from the skies, right? I mean, why, from a regulatory perspective, would you give old technology priority over new technology? I mean, horse and buggies, for example, don't have priority over cars in highways. I was pretty thrilled to see the Colombian airspace regulator attend several of these talks. Man, I would love to help him design those rules to make Colombia an early drone powerhouse while preserving safety. Number 8, public acceptance, I think, will occur faster than everybody thinks. And drones really have the potential to become way safer than traditional aviation. Why? The answer is pretty simple, because the number 1 cause of accidents is pilot error. Indeed, we saw this in the military, introducing drones at larger scales. You see rapidly the drone accident rate per 100,000 flying hours just plummet, and now they're achieving the same accident rates as traditional aviation, and they're doing so in some of the most complex missions. Most of those hours are earned during combat. So the great part about commercial drone technology is it has the advantage of benefiting from marching down the learning curve on the military side. I mean, we've been flying these things for over a decade. We've learned a lot of things along the way. I also believe that public acceptance is going to be a whole lot quicker than the drone experts assume. I mean, have you thought twice about, for example, riding an unmanned train in the Atlanta airport, or maybe another example would be riding in an elevator without an elevator attendant? It's crazy. We don't even think about that twice. Or, maybe you had some trepidation about putting your Tesla on autopilot, but everybody falls asleep now when they commute and lets the autonomous vehicle drive itself. I think the same is going to happen with urban air mobility. There'll be a novelty factor, and the fear will wear off fairly quickly, and I think it'll be a very successful business. One tip in terms of number 9, creating a successful drone business absolutely requires pilots, or at least folks with airmanship in your operations. From my experience, I can tell you, operating large fleets of drones, you need people who understand that third dimension, how to integrate with other forms of aviation, and who are really adept at designing and leading safe, effective, efficient flying operations. I can tell you stories about the Army, for example, not involving aviators, and that tended to be a disaster, or at least not realizing the potential that it could have. And just lastly, just a call to arms. Number 10 is just go for it. Successful drone startups are not going to wait for a confluence of factors to emerge before becoming successful. Everybody always brings their lists of 4 or 5 or 6 different things that are required before drones are adopted. I mean, you have to have all this huge alignment of supply chains and universal traffic management and regulatory systems and training. That's all garbage. From my perspective, I think waiting for an even playing field, all that does is just cede the first mover advantage. Just trust your gut, realize that you're poised to revolutionize business, commerce, and travel with this new technology. And really, you're very smart to be on the front leading edge of this disruptive, new, innovative technology that will undoubtedly change the world. Thanks.